I already know I'm going to be getting up and down, constantly getting these books off these shelves. Hi, it's Jade, and this is the Big Book tag. I got this idea from the wonderful Megan at Megan's Reading Revelations. For some reason, your channel title is really hard for me to say all in one go. This is the third time that I've tried. This is quite a short tag, so this may be one of my first videos that's under like 20 minutes long. I don't know. I seem to waffle a lot in these videos, so I'm not making any promises. But the tag consists of picking the biggest 5 books off your shelf that you've read, and then the biggest 5 books off your shelf that you have not read. I'm going to be utilising Goodreads for this, and what I'm going to do is go onto my read shelf and I'm going to sort by page count so that I know which are my biggest ones. Yeah, okay. I had it upside down for some reason, not upside down, I had it the wrong way round and was wondering why my top book was like 200 pages on. So I'm not including anthologies in this because they're short stories, so I don't think that really counts. So here we go. So the biggest book I've read is Lord of the Rings. This comes in at 1,216 pages. This copy is all 3 books and the appendices. It also includes the maps at the front and the family trees. Yeah. It also has a bunch of notes on all of the different editions, which it only takes up this much. And also the pages in this are like thin Bible pages. But I think everyone knows the story of Lord of the Rings. It's actually one of my all-time favourite books or trilogies. It's one of those few books that when I finished it, every time that I finished it, I'm like, I can't pick up anything else for a good couple of days because I just don't want to leave this wonderful world, and I don't want to like stop imagining that I am secretly a hobbit. But yes, so the Lord of the Rings is the tale of the Fellowship, namely Frodo, who, you know, is going on a big epic quest to destroy the ring and bring sort of peace and harmony back to Middle-earth. The thing that I love about the book, and also the movies, because I do think they did a good job of that, is the fact that basically the entire thing is a big long essay on the horrors of war and how war is a bad thing and it's not something to aspire to, and you shouldn't aspire to being a war hero, or like the defining characteristics of all of the main characters is their love for each other and their tenderness, and even like, the big mighty king Aragorn, the way he becomes king and his defining feature is his healing hands, not his war prowess. It's also very evident when you realise that this is a memoir written by hobbits, in that the Battle of Minas Tirith, arguably one of the biggest battles, takes maybe 2-3 pages in this entire thing, during which half of that just involves Aragorn taunting the orcs and no actual fighting, whereas an entire 2 chapters are dedicated to the planning of a birthday party. And I love that. And that is one of the things that I think a lot of modern fantasy that is trying to emulate Lord of the Rings misses. It focuses too much on the big battles and the war and the dark grittiness that just isn't in this. Every talk of war is in the negative. It's not something to aspire to, and they still humanise the foot soldiers that are on the other side as just people who have been taught this ideal and have a family, mothers and fathers, that they're never going to go and see again. And I think it's very evident that this was written by someone who survived the First World War and saw, actual combat and lost a lot of his you know, his friends that he'd grown up with, and yeah, I could talk for hours about Lord of the Rings, but I won't because I said this was going to be a short video. Second book, and I've managed to not have to stand up. So the second book that I have is also a fantasy book. Big shock there, and it is The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. This is actually the second book in this series. It's also... Okay, so Patrick Rothfuss is one of those people, a bit like George R.R. Martin, where he publishes these mammoth books and then just doesn't finish the series. There are 2 books in this series that are currently published, and they were published years ago. But anyway, the Name of the Wind series, this is the second one of, is following the tale of Quoth. Don't know how you pronounce that. And it's just the memoir of his life from growing up in a travelling circus, I believe, and then going to university, getting kicked out of university, the woman that he's in love with, and sort of just all of his adventures, pretty much. Yeah. Did I say that? I don't think I said the page length. This one is 994 pages. So we're under the 1,000 mark, but still a bit of a brick, to be honest. And yet, still really good in my opinion. Okay, so I've just looked down this list, and I don't think there is a single book that is not fantasy. Why are all fantasy books just doorstops? So the next book coming in at 870 pages is The Order of the Phoenix. Once again, I think everyone knows this. This is the 5th book in the Harry Potter series. This, following Harry's 5th year at Hogwarts, during the construction of Dumbledore's army. This is just after Voldemort has come back, and sort of the war is starting properly. It's less... This is, I think, the point in the series almost where it progressed from children's book to young adult, bordering on adult fiction. Which is, I mean, it is sort of amazing that as a series this did grow up with the reader. So, yeah. Number 4, at 830 pages, another fantasy book, The Priory of the Orange Tree. Sorry, this is one of those books that every time I take off my shelf I just have to stare at the cover for a little bit. So pretty. Me and my friends have a saying when someone has told a boring story, and that is, good story, needs more dragons. And when I described this to my mum, who also uses this saying, it was, good story, has a lot of dragons. I love dragons. So this is another fantasy book. This is more, I guess, court fantasy than I am used to, which is why I only got a 4-star instead of a 5-star for me. Because I'm not that big into, like, court politics, court drama and stuff like that. But set in an alternate universe where you have the East and the West, really. In the East, they revere dragons as being these beings of great wisdom, because in the East their dragons are water dragons and they help humanity, and there is like a faction of elites who are dragon riders, and they help to sort of keep law and order and stuff. And then you've got in the West, dragons are reviled, they're considered worms, because in the West they have only really experienced the fire-breathing dragons that follow a creature called the Nameless One that was banished 1,000 years ago by that was banished 1,000 years ago by the reigning queen at the time, and the Western kingdoms believe that as long as this queen and her sort of heirs continue to rule and continue to produce more heirs, and as long as that family bloodline is going strong, the Nameless One will never return. So this is predicated, like the initiating incident of this is that the current queen currently doesn't have an heir. She's not married, she doesn't seem to want to marry at this point in time. And it's coming up to that 1,000 year anniversary, so there's like a scrabble to produce an heir and keep this bloodline going and keep her alive because there are assassins after her. And yeah, I really liked this book, and despite how long it is, it didn't feel like, come on, this is just dragging now. There was stuff going on at all times. Okay, the final book in this list, because the other books were also Harry Potter books, so I'm just going to skip them, and I'm not just going to talk about Harry Potter again. I've gone on to the next one on the list, past those, is... I don't know why I didn't get off the shelf before I started talking about it. Is also the first book that is not a fantasy book. And coming in at 720 pages, that is A Little Life by Hana Yanagihara. This is the book that broke me. And yet, books that I know that I'm never going to get rid of, that I absolutely love, I have a little stamp that says, from the Library of Jade. And as soon as I finished it, I was like, this is being stamped. I mean, I'm currently weeping and have been for the past day and a bit, but this is staying on my bookshelf because I loved it so much. And maybe that makes me a masochist, I'm not sure, but A Little Life is a contemporary fiction that just follows the lives of these four men from meeting in university, just through their lives into middle age, basically. But as much as there is a main character, the main character Jude has had the worst life ever, I think. I mean, I understand when people call this book torture porn, and it is one of those few books that I was like, 5-star, loved it, will probably read it again just to, inflict more pain on myself. If people are like, oh, should I read it? I'm like, no, maybe not. I don't know. It's one that I'm very hesitant to recommend, and if I do recommend it, I don't give a shit if people consider this a spoiler. I will give you the list of trigger warnings. Fully. Because I think it would be... I would not be doing my due diligence in recommending this book without giving its trigger warnings. So... yeah, I will write those trigger warnings down in the description if anyone is interested in picking this up. So I would say, I loved this book, but go in with open eyes, and if at any point you feel like it's getting too much for you, put it down, because it only gets worse. Right, so those are all of the books that I've read. We will now move on to my want to read list. Here we go, sort by page count. Okay, let's go. And in sort of the opposite of what happened here, I think most of these are classics. So the first book, which is even longer than Lord of the Rings, coming in at 1,463 pages, is Les Mis. I'm not going to say the full title because my French accent sucks, and I don't want to offend him. So yeah, this is one brick of a book, and yeah, what can I say about Les Mis that people don't already know? This is a book that was adapted into a very prestigious and well-received theatre production, which also became a motion picture. People who watched the musical version of this on TV, not TV, as in the movie version, it was really good, but go and see it on the stage, because let me tell you, the emotion of seeing it there. Oh my. So yeah, this is a story with, once again, as far as there is a main character, it follows Jean Valjean, who is an ex-convict who was put in prison for stealing a loaf of bread. And once he leaves prison, he finds it really hard to restart his life because he has to constantly go back and sign in with his parole officer, despite the fact that it was a very minor non-violent crime that he was in prison for. It's like ruined the rest of his life. So after doing this for a while, he just decides he's going to break parole and he's going to disappear and he's going to just try and make a life for himself. And he does. For a while, he adopts a young girl who was the daughter of someone who worked for him, who is this one here. She is Cosette. But as his life is, just finally sort of settling down and he's sort of got what he wants, he comes in contact with Javert, who I think was the man who put him away initially, but is also the person who has made it his mission to find Jean Valjean and just put him back behind bars. Whilst all this is going on, there is also the French Revolution. This is not the first one where they deposed the king and queen and cut off their heads. It is the one that happened later, the Students' Revolution, and you're also following the students, including Marius Pontomessy and the rest of those lot. He's the only person whose name I can remember off the top of my head. And they're building of the revolution, and during this point, Marius is falling in love with Cosette, and it's just a lot. It's like basically a French soap opera set in revolutionary era France. Okay, the next one, I shouldn't be surprised that this is on the list. It is 1,392 pages, so another one that is longer than Lord of the Rings and is also a complete brick is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This is one where I don't actually know that much about the story. I remember reading a bit of it when I was younger, but I was too young to be reading something this big and this heavy, really. All I know is that it is following a lot of the Russian aristocracy. I think maybe during the... Oh, it's the war with Napoleon. Okay, I got the time period completely wrong. I thought this was happening during... when the Tsar was being deposed and Rasputin and all that jazz. But no, it's way before then. This is Napoleon. But yeah, so this is just sort of rise and fall of a lot of the aristocracy in Russia and during war and peacetime, as far as I know. But I do want to get to this at some point. Oh god, it's right at the bottom of the stack as well. Okay, so number 3, coming in at 1,276 pages. All of these books are longer than the books that I've read. Is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. And I'm laughing and I'm sorry because I cannot read his name without reliving that scene in The Shawshank Redemption. By Alexandre Dumas. Sorry, my American accent sucks as well. But yeah, sorry. This is about a man who is wrongfully convicted and sent to prison. And the whole story is following him from being put in prison, escaping from prison, rebuilding his wealth and everything, and then exacting revenge on the people that put him in prison. And I'm not entirely, because I've watched a couple of the movie adaptations of this. I don't really know how that story goes into this many pages, but I'll find out. Okay, so the only book on this list that is not what would be considered a classic, I guess. I mean, it's like... Yeah, no, I don't think it's considered a classic because it wasn't written long enough ago. What is the actual definition of a classic? We have some classics that were written in, the 70s, don't we? Anyway, but you can also tell because it actually says epic there that it is still a brick. And that's 1,152 pages of The Stand by Stephen King. This is the only Stephen King novel I own. And I know that it is even bigger. But I don't know, Stephen King was never an author that I was all that interested in reading. But I don't know, maybe that'll change. I just know that the story of The Stand is a story that my mum actually told me when I was younger, almost as like a bedtime story. She'd like watched the movie and then just told me the bare bones of it. I don't know, is that a weird thing to do? And it's been stuck in my head since then. I was just like, I need to read this. So she couldn't remember who had written it, what the name was, or anything like that. And then at some point a couple of years ago, she like called me, I think, and was like, you know that story I told you that you keep asking me about? It's The Stand by Stephen King. I was like, oh, awesome. And I think I went out and bought it like that day. I was at uni at the time. This is another post-apocalyptic kind of thing where a great plague has decimated the human population of the Earth, and it's kind of split into sort of two factions. One is run by a woman who... I'm going to try and remember the way my mum described it. A woman who... like, her group lives in a wheat field, I think, and she's almost like the epitome of Mother Nature and goodness and light. And then you have the Dark Man, who is like this shadowy figure, and his followers, who are like the evil. And it's like, it was told to me as like the clash of good and evil, yeah. So maybe this is going to completely shatter what that bedtime story was to me, but... yeah, this is the first sort of Stephen King novel that I was like, I really want to read that. And back to the classics, and the last one on this list, coming in at 1,023 pages. None of these went below the thousands. That is Don Quixote. I know that this, I think, was translated almost from Middle English or something. No, it can't have been. It was Spanish. Yeah, sorry, it was Spanish. But it was, I think, it was quite old style writing when it was first written. First modern novel, yeah. But, yes, so Don Quixote is like a book within a book. It's one of those rare meta stories where the main character, knows he's being written about. And there's a lot of fourth wall breaking. And this is where the titular tilting at windmills comes from. So the way it was described to me from my mother is that this follows the story of a mad person who wants to be a knight. And he thinks that the windmills are dragons. And the whole thing is written as though it's being transcribed from someone who found these stories of this old knight and is writing about them. But I'm pretty sure at like some point the narrative just breaks off and he starts talking to you. Like, I think Don Quixote starts talking to you. So yeah, it just seems like a really interesting thing that I want to read about. Right, so that's all of my big ass books. And like I said, I didn't include anthologies because otherwise all of these would be all of my like collected works of Edgar Allan Poe and the Necronomicon and stuff like that. And because all of those individual stories aren't that long, it doesn't really seem fair to include them on this list when you have just big tomes of one story.